Hello Cancer, thank you for joining me for your monthly forecast for October for the Sun or the Ascendant. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. If your birthday is from the 4th of July through to the 15th, I think you will have been particularly affected by a phenomenon that's gone on since about the 4th of April this year. The North Node, the point of destiny, which is almost like the emotional pull of the heavens, has been in the sign of Cancer since last November the 7th. But across those days, across those birthdays specifically, Saturn has been in opposition to the North Node. Now Saturn can be a really quite testing influence, and it's been therefore in your 7th house, your sector of relating. It's been there since December the 20th, 2017, but this particular opposition may, for many Cancerian people, have seen you felt a little bit restricted, almost like you can't get all of your breath when you try to express particularly sensitive parts of your nature. But the great news is that by the 10th of this month, that opposition comes to a close. And I do think you're going to feel a sense of liberation, but particularly if you do have your birthday between the 5th or the 15th. So that's something to really look forward to. Also Jupiter, the planet of growth and optimism, which is in a very practical part of your chart, is forging a fab angle to Pluto, the planet of change, all through this month. If you want to get together in a very constructive alliance where there is a fair share between who contributes what, and it's clearly understood who does and undertakes what, then a partnership really could spur you on and be hugely successful this month. But I have to say, partnerships do hold some challenges too, because as this month begins, Cancer, the Sun and also Mercury and Venus are all in the tender 4th house for you. And in the case of Mercury, this has not necessarily been an easy transit. However, the great news is that on the 3rd, Mercury ingresses, it moves into the sign of Scorpio, which of course is your sister water sign. Now Mercury in this area is going to trigger your sense of humour. Your sense of fun is going to come more to the fore. But also from the 5th through to the 11th, Mercury's in an opposition with the rather random influence of Uranus, which for 5 months last year and since March the 7th this year has really been giving you an opportunity to think again about the type of people you'd be associated with, or even about some long-term plans. And there's part of you that is prepared to be more experimental. And I do feel that there can be some exciting conversations triggered by this connection between the two. Now, also on the 3rd, Pluto ends a retrograde, which has gone on for some months, and that is in your sector of relationships as well. But I do feel that you are going to get some potential for politics still around some alliances, because from the 5th through to the 11th, the Sun is in a right angle with Saturn. The Sun in the 4th house is asking you to embrace the more receptive, the more emotional, the more sensitive side of your nature. It's actually very much in keeping with your sun sign, but it's coming through the vehicle of air. So the part of you which sometimes can find it difficult to articulate your feelings or feel that you need to just protect yourself so strongly, well, that is being emphasized by the Sun, and then continuing through to the 8th, Venus. Now Venus, for the first 8 days of this month, therefore, can be superb if you're wanting to transform your home space, add some new colours or textures or new furnishings, or perhaps start a home-based business, or there could be good news about a family situation. But once Venus moves on the 9th into Scorpio 2, a wonderful location if you're wanting to invest in your love life and be much more trailblazing in that area. Venus then goes into a 5-day opposition with Uranus too. So there could be a surprise invitation to a date. You could connect with someone who may in the past have not been your cup of tea if you give yourself permission. Because maintaining your boundaries around you to protect your vulnerabilities is a massive part of your very being. And if this has become something that you've done to such a degree that you're almost ingrained in a rather defensive, if I could be so honest, response, it's going to be highlighted by Saturn's square to the Sun from the 5th to the 11th. But then from the 11th to the 17th, the Sun goes into a mighty right angle with Pluto. Pluto since 2008 has been asking you to think very carefully about relationships, but it may have at times seen you act very firmly about who you will or will not have in your world. Pluto can be a force for great good, but it can be ruthless. So it's possible that you could be a little bit oversensitive about an issue, and it's therefore going to be important with these really quite testing right angles to Saturn and Pluto that your responses are not overblown, that you're not imagining something is more threatening than it really is. The wonderful news, however, is that from the 10th through to the 17th, the Sun forges a gorgeous angle to Jupiter. And if there is something that you want to achieve at home and you want to be more enterprising, you could gain an awful lot. You can be very productive across those days, provided there isn't any politics around a relationship. Perhaps a relationship needs to change. Perhaps it's become a little bit too preset, too conditioned, and the energies coming in from Saturn and Pluto are prompting you to look again. Then again, perhaps it's energies you're giving out. It just depends. But I think Jupiter and its angle to the Sun just suggests that there can be positive changes around your emotional life. It can be good. Now, Mars is going to be moving on the 4th into Libra. I can only be honest about it. Mars is a planet which is in detriment in this part of your scope. That means it's opposite to the sign it rules, which is Aries. It also rules Scorpio. But for you, I think it can just give you a bit of drive to get some physical changes made at home. If you've been wanting that new kitchen or bathroom, or to build that wall in the garden, or to make some changes to your outdoor space, or to downsize or upsize, or to support someone in a very keen way that perhaps maybe is moving on in their life, Mars can give you a lot of gusto and a lot of fieriness to do this. But it can, in the 4th house, be quite defensive. So just bear that in mind, quite prickly, sort of almost like responding in a reactive way rather than a proactive way. So just be conscious of that. But the full moon, which occurs on the 14th, is fascinating because it sees a T-square between the full moon in Aries, the Sun in Libra, and, yes, Pluto. So we're not going to get away from that Pluto and Saturnian influence quite so easily as just Saturn ending its opposition to the point of destiny on the 10th. But the direction of travel is helpful and hopeful. I just feel it's all about trying to understand that there may be some things to do with your outer world that are being influenced by your inner responses, that are being affected by relationships or are affecting your relationships. Try to see it as simply as that. But then the Sun moves gloriously into Scorpio on the 24th. And this really is something to celebrate. Your physical energy is going to pick up hugely. It is true that the Sun is in opposition with Uranus pretty well for the rest of the month. And the new moon, which occurs on the 28th, is also going to pick up on that as well. But it's just saying to you, go with things a little bit more. Don't deny things simply because it may be fearful. It may not be how you come across to other people. You could be coming across to other people in a very reinforced way. They may not be seeing your vulnerabilities, but actually, if you have become so conditioned to reacting just quickly to things like no, what Uranus is suggesting to you all this month is, well, try yes. Be a bit more experimental. Give yourself the permission to fail sometimes. It's not going to be the end of the world. And in fact, it can be so much more enriching if you do reach out beyond what feels strictly safe on that beach within the homeliness of your shell as the crab that you are. So yes, there are times when you can go left and right and you'll do anything to avoid a confrontation, but sometimes to avoid that confrontation, you can get into denying the oxygen to relationships. And I think what Saturn and Pluto are trying to get you to do is open up, tell people how you feel, share your vulnerabilities, but also be assertive about what you don't like, but articulate them. And Venus, Mercury and the Sun are all giving you a push to do that this month. And if there are tensions, try not to see anyone that doesn't quite come up to your standard or your mark as being an entirely awful person. They're not. They're a composite of many different shades and colours, and some of those you may find tricky. I understand the Cancerian vibe so well because my Draconic, what I brought into this world, Moon and Venus are in Cancer. Also, the cluster of planets I have in my natal chart in Aquarius are all in the 4th house, so very Cancerian. So get this, it's part of me too. But as this month draws to a close, if you can engage in situations with an openness, Uranus can bring so much light and texture to your existence. It is true that Mercury goes retrograde as the month draws to a close. So if you make a date for the 31st of the month, well, it could be changed. But it could be you doing the changing. But I do feel that there is so much to go for this month for you. But I think it's going to be particularly liberating to feel that that most sensitive point in your situation, which is asking you to really go forth with the sensitivity, the kindness, the nurturing that's so core to the Cancer being, go forth with it in a more abandoned way. And I think from the 10th of this month is certainly going to allow it. If you'd like to know more about personal astrology, please click on the link beneath this video and check out my chart store. You can buy a year's forecast or a character analysis together for a 30% discount, or have a one-to-one personal consultation with me. But for now, it's been a pleasure being with you, Cancer. Good luck and goodbye.